Before I start, I gotta give this Prenote thing said real quick, so bear with me. I do apologize for getting this out after the patch drops. The universe basically said go fuck yourself with the timing of things. Oh, and I also got COVID, so that's super dope. With that said, I hope you can understand why this was limited to only the 2.4 trailer and not the patch as a whole. Regardless, the ideas apply anyhow, and so I hope you guys can still learn and make further connections as we continue on to 2.4. But yes, this is only limited to the 2.4 trailer since I have been working on this video for that long. Wuthering Waves does a lot in terms of taking from philosophy and academia as a whole. There's many extrapolations and connections you can make, and they are giving us another and the most recent idea of Agon. So that's what I want to talk about today and how it relates to the real world and naturally tying it back to Wuthering Waves. I'll go over the idea of what it is, then I'll tie it into Wuthering Waves and where we can see agonistic thought and ideas at play and where we may further see it. I will be using this source, Conflict and Competition, Agon in Western Greece, as a foundational source for where I'm getting my information. So let it begin. Timestamps are available. Also, hold on to your waves because it's deeper than Kathy's deep ass pans.
Bigger pan, bigger tits.
Before I go hella deep in the history, culture, societal, and academic works I cite, I think this would be the easiest way of understanding this concept as a baseline. Think of yourself as an athlete, but don't just limit it to the physical side. Apply that idea of being an athlete to literally every aspect of life. It takes a lot to become an athlete in anything, and to do anything competitively. Agon could be looked at as a mindset of the competitive athlete applied to the body, mind, and spirit. I believe this would be the shortest way of explaining Agon in a very bare bones way, but I still recommend watching further so that you'll understand more and also connect more deeply with the Wuthering Waves references. Again, this goes much deeper than you probably think. Agon in real life is a term that has a lot of history and culture tied into it. It comes from ancient Greece, and you may be familiar with it as a kind of competition, and that is right. However, that is the changed version of Agon. In ancient Greece, Agon originally meant gathering, like to gather in a market as pointed out by Hyland in his section Heraclitus' Paradigms of Polemos. But in the essence of what Agon really is, it is the ability to strive through the conflicts you face, typically done through equal and fair competition between one another and finding virtue through your success. As time has gone on and copious amounts of research has been analyzed and compared, Agon is something that is intersectional with many other areas, multifaceted in application, and dips into a lot of other areas like economics, politics, philosophy, drama and the arts, and athletics, to name a few. In fact, you're more than likely going to find a Britannica excerpt talking about how it's a type of drama or debate, but that isn't the full picture. For example, it could be a competition of athletes, and it's in part where we get the common phrase, win or die trying. The original line of that is, return with their shields or on them, which is in reference to coming back with your shield showing you won or on it because you threw your 1v1 and are being carried on one, because you suck and are dead.
What the actual fuck?
Agon could also be a court trial or a rhetorical debate, which could be seen and outlined in this essay by Eva Anagastau-Lotitis, Drinking Competitions, Plato and the Sicilian Tyrants, which connects various stories of Plato's drinking competitions to a critique of tyrannical Sicilian rule through the symposium. The stories themselves are agonistic in finding out who is still with their wits through the alcohol, but are also cleverly aiming to showcase the difference in acumen to rule. Basically, can you still be smart and competent after chugging a shit ton of wine? It is sometimes regarded as a truth serum, and that's basically what is said, as stated by Anagastau-Lotitis. In the fierce competition that unfolds across archaic Greek polities between the old elites and the nouveau riches, the new flaunty rich assholes on the block, who increasingly demanded political recognition, wine drinking etiquette provided an unexpected yet effective test for a man's ethos. In this context, losing control because of intoxication was regarded as a sign of ignoble character, clearly unsuitable for political leaders. Agon is more of an encompassing idea related to general struggle, aka eris or strife. When you think or hear Agon, striving through struggle via a competitive gathering aiming for success in your field should be the outlining idea. Culturally, you can see this agonistic idea through their tales reflecting struggle amidst the cosmic gods, which I'm sure you know is all very common. You can also extrapolate an agonistic idea when looking through their history too, as ancient Greece had a tendency to portray their history in a way which we would heavily disagree with now. They would do a combination of stories and in a way mythicize their historical foundations, which Parrish Wright explains in her essay, Identity and Agon, Lockery after the battle at the Sagra. The existence of variants was commonplace in the ancient world, and the decision to emphasize one variant or another demonstrates a conscious choice on behalf of a city and thus a moment of articulation of identity. This variation of history and your identity is something that could be seen as an agonism, a gathering of different tales vying for which one is deemed most fitting for a better collective good. Interestingly too, culturally, Agon was a cornerstone of ancient Greek views, as there was a kind of yearning for wanting to be the most Greek, in whatever capacity, whether that's strength or dominant thought. This was especially the case too because during this time of ancient Greece, things were mostly city-states, like what we see in Wuthering Waves. That means each city-state had a culture and viewpoint independent of their own, and as a result, it roused a kind of competitiveness between the city-states. There was very little country or national-wide unification. Sound sort of familiar? But while competition and the struggle are the main driving forces for living, it's more importantly about the ideas of virtue as they pertain to you and your success. The success aspect is one that is unique to each arena you find yourself in, and this can be seen in Kirchner and Anton's essay, The Ancient Hellenic Virtue of Success. This essay outlines and breaks down the three Hellenic thoughts of virtuous success, Aristotelian, Socratic, and Stoic, and how their ethics hinge on something called a success condition. Ultimately, the paper shows that success is dictated a bit differently among the three systems of thought despite being extremely different or even opposed in their idea of virtue and success. For each Hellenic view, the aim of virtue and virtue's achievement are identical. However, each position is unique in what it takes the goal to be. What it takes the goal to be. The struggle of finding what it takes to be. That is the Agon and finding success there. Socrates would want to try and improve the imperfection of the world around him, bringing them closer to the real perfect by trying to convince others. That is his success in Agon. Aristotle would pick and choose the battles of educating those willing to be educated, but ignore those who aren't, as wasting time trying to educate the willingly foolish hurts moral health, or eudaimonia. Stoics like Marcus Aurelius would simply ignore the idiots as they don't understand what he does, and trying to change their mind isn't in his control. So he'd advocate to pray they can rub two brain cells together and learn from him, as he does his own thing. That is success in his Agon. These examples through ideology and virtues of Hellenic views are to show that Agon is something that can be relatively flexible depending on the arenas in which you face your Agon. Last main Agon bit before I hit the Wuthering Waves ties. Agon in a more modern lens became more known in the West because of prominent and smarter people than me. Jacob Burckhardt was one who was most famous for being considered a father of art history, Renaissance history, and of course Greek history, spanning 4 volumes which are unfortunately unfinished. Friedrich Nietzsche was another, and some of you may be a little more familiar with him.
Who posted my nudes on Twitter.com?
As he's taught more broadly in things like intro philosophy courses for some generalities on nihilistic philosophy. But he was also heavily known for his interest, study, and work regarding Greek culture and history as well. They were 2 famous examples of intellectuals who studied, acknowledged, and in many ways seemed to laud the Greek agonal approach to life. They valued Agon, yet saw the flaws which are seen in this essay titled Burckhardt and Nietzsche, The Dark Luster of Ancient Greece by Tobias Joho. The essay talks about a lot regarding these two, but the prominent bit I want to pick out is in relation to equality in Agon. Fair competitions were important because it's foundational in trying to reach a higher standard or understanding of things on good faith and equality. It's also the only way to give accuracy in capabilities of a culture or society if you're trying to out-Greek the other city-states through agonal competitions. And 2, why would you want your foundational bed to be based on false pretenses of strength? Short-term may bide you for time, but when reality sinks in and you need to execute on that strength, that false veil will fall faster than the losers before you. Quote, for Burckhardt, The central precondition for the rise of the Agon is the freedom combined with equality. Without basic equality, at least among the aristocracy, people would have lacked peers of equal rank and ability, an indispensable ingredient if a genuine competition with open outcomes was to take place." End quote. Similarly, Nietzsche also seemed to believe that equality was an important aspect for Greek culture in relation to politics. When looking at ostracism as a tool of politics, he notes that he believes the purpose of it for the ancient Greeks was agonal in nature, meant to act as a means of stimulation so that equal competition can remain that, cutting out or ostracizing those who would make the agonal process predictable. I mentioned these two people because they brought agonistic perspective to more recent times and saw it as a more lustrous beacon of virtue and way of thinking compared to the modern way, which tends to push back against the tenets of Agon. But to me, fairness and equality in Agon is mostly about consistency. Unfairness leads to skewed unvirtuous events, and the unvirtuous people who benefit from it lead to instability when facing an actual greater foe who do not rely on these shady tricks. When looking through other papers too, separate from the main source that I use here, I found this quote taking from Plato, which sums up fairness in Agon aptly. Quote, "It is very inconsistent for a man who asserts that he cares for virtue to be constantly unfair in discussion, and it is unfair in discussion when a man makes no distinction between merely trying to make points and carrying on a real argument." Okay, so what you're all actually here for, Agon and Wuthering Waves. So with the 2.4 trailer and live stream in mind, where are these agonisms seen? Well, they are seen all throughout this little teaser. I mean, the most obvious would be that Septimon is based around a competition called Agon and has a large focus on gladiator duels. Lupa, though, is a prime example of someone who is participating in an athletic agonist or contest. From the little bit, she seems to be eager to be better in battle through the battles themselves, and in an idle animation, she is learning from her previous battles so she can strive to be a better combatant on the field. It's also mentioned that she left her old team, the Bow of Legions, due to potential family members doing shady scale tippings. Literally, the first thing you hear out of her is this.
"I don't care what you do off the field, but in the arena, fairness isn't negotiable."
Meaning she wants to adhere to Agon as a principle while participating in the event named after it. No funny business, no unfair or mismatched BS, a fair fight in the arena. Which is funny and kind of ironic considering Cartithia is absolutely atomizing this poor dude here. But Lupa looks to be the encompassing idea of athletic Agon. Go forward a bit and we get to the Fractsidus, specifically Frolova and Cristoforo. As they are 100% theater kids, they are using this opportunity to be nerds and inject some kind of Greek tragedy parallel, I believe. In doing this though, they are engaging with it through that Britannica idea of Agon, a clashing debate or drama between ideologies which could be outlined between Rover and Cartithia and the Fractsidus' pursuits. But as a more direct correlation, listen to this. In the intro to this source that I've been using, this is written about Agon. Agon is also something that has two inseparable faces, constructive and destructive. Quote, "The pain of death brings the comfort of reunion with loved ones in the afterlife. The heated debates of philosophers move them closer to the truth. The dramatic struggles of tragic figures help audiences to make a sense of their daily life agonists. Even natural conflict among volcanoes, meadows, rivers, and the sea becomes, through poetry, a way to learn about ourselves." End quote. Now, look at this clip with Cristoforo.
Luck and misfortune, nobility and lowliness, weakness and strength. A person's nature is like two sides of a coin.
Seems very similar, no? The things he lists out are very much in relation to these two inseparable faces of Agon, the destructive and constructive things that are a part of it. I believe Cristoforo and the Fractsidus are creating mischief in Septimont as a kind of strife for the people so that something bigger may be learned from the oncoming dark tide. The Fractsidus have also had a decent track record on what is true too. Scar wasn't lying about Jue, and Frolova wasn't lying about Renacida or the Maiden being dead. They seem to be rooted in some truths, but Cristoforo is striking me as interesting considering he seems to operate in an in-between state, where maybe truths are yet to come, since he seems to have some kind of literal playwright, story-making, or reality-shaping resonance ability. It makes you question what is true, and maybe that's all part of the dramatic Agon that the Fractsidus wants us to struggle with so we can learn more about societies and maybe Rover themselves. But the cool thing is that it goes deeper, because when you connect this idea of the two faces, you may find some talking about the unity of the opposing paths of good and bad strife, finding harmony or unification as a result of the process of Agon. In fact, it's mentioned in these two essays, Hyland's Heraclitus, Paradigms of Polemos, and Joho's Burckhardt and Nietzsche on the Agon. But I'll just focus on Hyland's quote, since the point of unity from Agon as ancient Greece's cultural pin tie into Wuthering Waves regardless. Hyland's essay mentions, quote, "The very word connotes the apparently paradoxical phenomenon that a striving against each other could in fact be a striving together. Hence a source, in the end, not of discord but of unity. Various modes of competition became a most important cultural source of unity for the Greeks." End quote. How I understand the mentality is, in the striving you do against your opponent, you also do together, because you're both aiming for success to the best of your ability. I bring this up because Wuthering Waves has used paradoxical themes before, and I believe Agon might be another one, but not as in your face maybe as some of the others. We are only shown Agon through the lens of athletic combat, limiting the viewpoint. Without the knowledge of what Agon is in a deeper way, you would only look at it as a competition of the athletics. When you see it as more than that, a system of social organization, a culture, a point of view for what it means to live, things become a little more interesting. From a story perspective too, I believe this two-faced coin of Agon, in which unity comes together from striving opponents, may be a front that Cristoforo puts on as a justification for what he and the Fractsidus may be doing. Not only that, but if you look beyond him and remember that Frolova is going to be coming to us in the near future, it may be within these kinds of pretenses where we find common ground. I believe too that Agon, with this idea of creating unity, is what may bring us closer to Lupa and Cartathea as characters. Cartathea is especially, after all, both Sentinel and Threnodian's resonator, part human and god. She's paradoxical in nature, and so it would make sense that she travels to Septimont to use Agon as a principle to see what more she can find out about herself, and maybe strive with any inner turmoil to hopefully reach harmony and unity. There's going to be a lot that can be taken away from 2.4, I believe, and I think this will be the starting of where our enemies will start to make us think about things differently compared to just our allies. We haven't had a lot of long interactions and back and forths between Rover and the Fractsidus. That means potential is high since this patch looks to focus more heavily on their involvement in whatever they're cooking up in Septimont. Agon offers and has offered a lot as a whole in terms of thinking and cultural relevance, and has embedded itself as a mainstream historical kickoff point. Agonisms show up everywhere, and that can even encompass your favorite pieces of media, like Wuthering Waves. This was definitely more dense, and I hope it all made sense. Despite such a simple kind of meaning on its face with Agon, sometimes even the smallest of words create the grandest of waves.